Can everybody hear me?
Morning, Sietse. Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. I just want to confirm, hi Vanessa. Nice to see you, Roby. Nice to see you on the call. I'm just seeing that the panel members are here, and then Johan. Hi, Roby. And I see that Johan is also on the call. Shirley is going to share the presentation with us any moment. I see it is 11:20, so we're going to make a start. So let me just welcome you all to this this very exciting session that we're going to have. If you see on the next slide, we have a very distinguished panel with us today. Consisting of Johan Strydom from CSIR, Bongi Lengo from CSIR, Vanessa from Anglo American and METF, and then Roby Stancel, who's our global expert. Sad to say that Bongi cannot join us today. She's not well, and I ask you all to keep her in your thoughts and prayers as she recovers from disease. And then very grateful for Johan Strydom, who was willing to actually stand in on her behalf during this session. So I think you're all aware that South Africa used to be a global leader in mining RDI. But in the last 2 decades, we have seen that capability and capacity being eroded. So what we now, as Roger Baxter mentioned this morning, is we believe that one needs an accelerated and also a transformative capacity building program to build a new generation of innovators that can restore South Africa to that global mining RDI leadership that we had. And this is an important and yet very complex challenge that we cannot exhaust in 20 minutes. Hence, the panel decided that for today, this is only going to be an exciter for all of you present on this call and all your colleagues to join us in the journey. The Minerals Council, as you heard before, has adopted a people-centered modernization drive, and it is aimed at reviving the RDI and accelerating the adoption of modernization across the mining value chain. The CSIR has recently completed a study on their RDI capability and capacity. And so what we're going to do in today's panel discussion is we're going to have the study presented, and that's going to be done by Johan Strydom. And then Vanessa is going to give us an industry perspective on the matter. And then Roby Stancel is going to give us an international perspective on the issue. And then we'll have some Q&A. Just in short for us, I think it is time to build back better, as we all have been within this pandemic. So I think you see the pictures of the Springbok captain and Springbok coach. I think if you look at that epic victory that we had of the World Cup, there's some very vital lessons that we actually can learn from that in dealing with this particular challenge. The first one was to have a very clear vision of what we want to achieve. The second then was to align everybody through trust, honesty, and meaning, align everybody behind that vision. The third thing was then to hold that vision while the tactics of the game obviously had to be changed. And then the last one is to hold a high level of standard that supports the vision that we want to achieve. Now, Rassie was the one who really reframed the pressure that there was on the Springboks by creating hope and linking to specific positive behaviors into the future. And Sia exemplified leadership through humility. And I think from this, these are some of the qualities that we will need to embrace as a whole mining cluster collectively if we're going to chase this prize of becoming a global leader in mining RDI again. So with those few opening remarks, can I please hand over to Johan Strydom to take us through the methods and then the outcomes of the study that he's been very instrumental in. Johan, over to you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, and good morning to everyone, and thank you for your interest in this topic. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. We need to look at what the objectives are for a national RD&I program. Any program that CSIR undertakes or what the MMP undertakes needs to have an impact on the industry, improve the competitiveness of the industry. And in this case, it's the mining industry that we're talking about. And we need, because we're a small country with limited resources, we need to mobilize the full ecosystem, the universities, the industry, consultants, the science councils, all of that. We need to have a Team South Africa approach. There's two things to do. The one is the building of those solutions, which could be systems and technologies and products and so on. And the other is the capability to create those systems and solutions and so on, and the capacity. So capability in our definition has to do with the expertise, the people side of things with infrastructure for RD&I and so on. And capacity is more to do with the headcount in each of the areas of expertise and throughput of RD&I facilities and infrastructure. We also need to be quite bold and ambitious in what we undertake. So the National R&D program must deliver world-class solutions because the industry will buy where it gets the best value for money. And because it's the best way of developing expertise. You know, if you set really challenging and ambitious technical targets for every system, every product, you know, people are stretched to reach those targets, and they learn the quickest. So we need to also make sure that we have the program management infrastructure in place to keep our effort focused on the things that will really make a difference. So it's a R&D capability, technical capability, but also the R&D management capability that's important. So if we take the first one, how do we build this expertise as quickly as possible? You know, expertise has been an area of study or investigation over decades, and you might all be aware of the 10,000 hours heuristic, actually 10,000 hours of perfect practice, as they call it, or of constantly stretching yourself. And the question is, how do we create an environment where people can go through that 10,000 hours in a minimum number of years and get to that world-class level of expertise? So clearly we need to have a R&D program that has a set of projects in it, every project more demanding than the one before, so that we stretch our teams. We need to have an environment where we can focus on the work for a large percentage of the day, concentrate deeply, work on the engineering problems. And we need to have the R&D infrastructure in place so that our technical teams don't spend all their time struggling with infrastructure, rather be learning. Infrastructure is also sometimes an edge in the R&D world, as you all know. If you can measure, for example, things that other R&D teams cannot measure, if you can pilot quicker through your infrastructure, your learning rate is faster, and you're more likely to come up with breakthroughs than competing teams. And then, of course, you need a set of mentors. The right mentors can speed up the learning process significantly. So as R&D managers, we have to ask ourselves how we contribute in creating this environment inside CSIR and in universities and everywhere that we're doing RD&I. So the pilot that we did, it's not the first time that we do a capability assessment, and I see there's a few people on the call from CSIR that's been involved in previous capability assessments in CSIR. It's actually quite a tricky thing to do. So what we did this time around was to start off with selecting a set of mining processes and systems to focus the study on, and I'll show a slide a bit later on what those were. And then for each one of those systems and processes, we gathered information on what the current industry pain points are, what the deficiencies are currently. And we also did a bit of foresighting and scenario kind of work, dreaming about the future, what these systems will look like once they're fully 4IR infused. And we took that two sets of information, and from that derived the research questions that's still open, that needs to be answered to get us from where we are now to the ideal future system or process. First cut on that, and then that piece of information we took and extracted the areas of expertise and the depth of expertise required to answer those research questions and resolve the technology challenges. That ended up in quite a spreadsheet of many disciplines. I think it's one of the signs of our times is how multidisciplinary things have become. And we use that then as a template for doing our gap analysis in the mining cluster. And next phase will be to expand that into CSIR. And hopefully at some point we would do that nationally. As I said in the beginning, we need to have a Team South Africa approach and mobilize the whole ecosystem. We have very few engineers, scientists, and innovators available to us. This is Bongi's slides that talks to some of the findings. First, a bit of the history of the mining research capability in CSIR and in the country. It's a bit of a silly story, as I think everyone is aware. As you can see there on the left, we started off with over 200 RD&I staff members. And over time, due to financial pressures and so on, that dwindled down in that middle block to about 60 people, and the capability was then sort of semi-disbanded in CSIR. One group remained in the Center for Mining Innovation in the Natural Resource and Environment unit in CSIR. And we went through quite a detailed process for our current strategy called Synapse in CSIR, looking at the economy and things like forward and backward linkages of different industries. And obviously mining again came out as a very, very important sector in the economy. So CSIR on the top level decided to reinvest in mining, and we created a cluster. It's currently our smallest cluster in CSIR. And we're making additional investment funding available to build this capability up based on the principles and the analysis that I've shown. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we took as first step a number of systems and processes to base the study on, and these are the ones that we focused on: rock mass monitoring, ore body knowledge, rock breaking, support systems, drilling systems, rock handling and transport, ventilation systems, and then a very important one, the change management, people-centered technology adoption one, which is not so much something that's got a deep technical content like the others, but nevertheless very important one. So for each of these, we went through that process of looking at the pain points and deficiencies, build a little bit of a technology tree or a structure diagram or a block diagram for each of them, what it looks like at the moment, and then took a stab at guessing what it would look like in the future for all of them, and then ran our process of what's the research questions and technology challenges for each one of these. Next slide, please. So I think, as one could predict, what came out of our study on the left-hand side is that we have in our cluster the traditional mining specific capabilities. Many of them on like a medium level of expertise, very few of them, unfortunately, at the top level of expertise. I think there's actually only one where we have a principal researcher, which is the top level in, or nearly the top level at CSIR. So we have our work cut out for ourselves to build that up again. And then what also came out is a lot of the cross-cutters, the 4IR kind of things. Just about every system needs some automation or robotics going forward. Software, especially embedded software, mechatronics, that kind of thing. Very important gap at the moment is systems performance modeling for each one of the types of systems, but also for the end-to-end mining supply chain, you could say. Get the best return in terms of focusing your R&D. Internet of Things, sensors, sensor signal processing, all of that kind of stuff. I guess a few surprises there. We're a bit constrained in time, but the report is about 100 pages. So there's 10 to 15 pages per system with the analysis, and the main thing that comes out is a few paragraphs description of every speciality that we need to recruit for, that we have to build up for, or look for partners for in the ecosystem going forward. And then, of course, very important is this topic of dynamic capabilities. Is essentially the ability to learn quickly, faster than anyone else, and you know, to be able to operate in this fast-changing world. And there, virtual reality, augmented reality, and so on will play a role. In RD&I, it plays a very important role in the CAD systems and so on all the levels of design, from the mine as a system down to individual pieces of equipment. One can use virtual reality and augmented reality for speeding up the design cycles and so on, but also then afterwards for on-the-job training and growing skills of staff on the mine. I think that's the last slide. Yeah, thank you.
Can I take over?
Yes.
You can hear me. Perfect. I'm going to put off my video just in case. So good morning to the panel and to the audience. It's a real pleasure to be part of today's panel. And as Sietse said, I hope this is a start to a much deeper engagement as the industry. I like to consider myself as a stalwart in mining, having spent some 26 years in various roles in the extractive industry. I'm also a patriotic South African, so really pleased at seeing the rugby team up front. And nothing would make me happier than to see our research, development, and innovation capability and capacity compete and stand amongst the best globally. But that said, I do recognize that we need to do things differently. if we want to take that center stage. The past is very nostalgic, but it's the future that really matters. And with that, I'd like to use the time today just to highlight a couple of things. So the first one, like on the slide, is the future of work. This is certainly a phrase that is top of mind for many mining CEOs. For me, the future of work is that transition of the nature of work and how we as the workforce adapt. And COVID has really given us a test around this. When we think about the drivers of this change, it is the unprecedented rate in digital transformation and technological innovation and adoption. In fact, in a recent report titled The Future of Work in South Africa by McKinsey and Company, the case for digitalization, modernization, and technology as a major economic booster for South Africa through productivity, per capita income gains, GDP growth is made. But it goes on to suggest that technology and digitalization will also create new demand for jobs. But these jobs will require higher levels of skill. And that's really important to note. So, wearing my METF hat, the demand for additional graduates is very, very pleasing. But we really need to be considerate around how do we skill up for that future. Realizing these outcomes on productivity, on jobs, will need specific focus, particularly for skilling, and possibly for a very different level of skill sets, as was discussed just now. The other driver around the future of work is the shifting dynamics and their attitude, shifting dynamics around demographics and the attitudes. Now, this can't be taken lightly because we know in South Africa, we've got 4.3 million youth that are unemployed. A further significant driver towards the future of work that must be considered and very intentionally delivered is to operate with a greater purpose and pursuit for sustainable futures. So it's against this background that we should consider how we pursue and accelerate research, development, and innovation in the mining sector. We have to adopt a systems view, not just pieces of the system, but really focusing on the end-to-end state. We always talk about the mining value chain. If anyone's been in the business, that's rolls off our tongue quite frequently. But we really need to get to better understand the intersections and the connections that add value, the real levers in that mining ecosystem that make a difference and create impact. Safety remains our number one focus as the industry. And it's really pleasing that the CSIR skills factory that we heard about this morning in the plenary is doing such great work on that front. Our RDI efforts must be resolute in taking people out of harm's way. That is an non-negotiable. Adopting a more responsible, experimental mindset, being agile, being bold, and really looking to leverage scale is an imperative in the VUCA world. We need to think of applied R&D, to really think about it as step change, seeking step change, being ambitious and transformational. We have to adopt a mindset of quick iterations that fail fast and fail forward. If you could move to the next slide for me, please. So secondly, what this brings me to is the need for partnerships, really strong partnerships, strong collaborations that create impact and go beyond our borders. On this slide is an innovative partnership between Anglo American, the CSIR, and a company called Ivaldi that's based out of the US. This partnership is a manifestation of Anglo American's collaborational regional development approach as part of our sustainable mining plan. So coming back to that sustainable futures that I spoke to a little earlier. And really what this opportunity is about, and it's really exciting, is that it looks to digitally distribute spare parts for mining and processing equipment that can be manufactured locally, so in South Africa, using 3D printing. Imagine that. the ability to send files in seconds, not physical parts, the opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint, to drive efficiencies, and to really make significant progress around lead times and logistics, a really different approach to how we think about our supply chains. Now that's exciting. And it's this level of collaboration that really needs to compel the way we think and the way we actually apply our research. So on that note, I'd like to pause and perhaps hand back to Sietse or to Roby.
Thank you, Vanessa. Roby, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. Let me add to what has been said with a, say, international view, if I can have the first slide. The value chain of mining should be accompanied by a knowledge value chain. So there is some governing body that sets the direction, then academia has the ideas and inventions that go with that. From that, startups take these and turn them into, prototypes and experiments, and then they turn into products and they are being implemented. That is the idea here. The question is which part, which player in this ecosystem takes which part. Very often academia and say the customer at the very end that really should define what this is about and where we want to take the research is not as much involved as they should be. So a close collaboration between, say, the mining houses and the academia and startup world is necessary. If I, for example, look at what happens if that isn't the case, take Germany. I mean, plenty of inventions come from Germany, but for example, the light bulb, the telephone, the computer, all are not known as German inventions because the Americans were the ones that commercialized it. So a big portion of the success of an invention, of course, is the commercialization. Most recent thing, for example, is the BioNTech a vaccine for COVID, which really is produced by Pfizer, leading to the inventors, Germany, not even having enough access to that vaccine. So the truth is somewhere in the middle. You need to have a business focus in what you're researching, and the US universities do that very well. They're a great example because they all are businesses. If it does make money for the university won't focus on it. That is a business model that allows them to attract very good talent that, however, might have had their education for their talent and their initial work elsewhere. And then this is basically a commercial system that capitalizes on that human capital. If I look at what happens in South Africa, there is so much experience here. There is the toughest mining context in the world is parallel stream to this one right now that talks about the mineral wealth of South Africa, especially with the green economy. There is so much in South Africa that can be reached from that. It does take 5 or 7 years sometimes to really be successful. However, to capture energy, to collaborate with the people with the experience and the energy would be a fantastic thing to do. If I look at Canada, I did the roadmaps for CIMIC, Canada Mining Innovation Council, and there what we did was exactly rally the troops around this one capability of finding the same direction for everybody. The same direction in that case was to define the reasons why funding should be put into the mining industry, and all CEOs were able to agree on that, and only once they agreed, then they set the direction. And let me close with something Johan said about mentors. This requires a mutual respect between the parties in order to unify that vision. And I, for example, have a South African young reverse mentor. So a student in his 20s, or not a student anymore, that ran a tuck shop at some point, then went into biomedical engineering, and he teaches me, not the other way around, how the world works today, what needs to happen, how society is changing, and so on. So if we all find ourselves a reverse mentor, then that will be a huge step forward. And with that, let me give back to Sietse.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
That. I say we're not going to have any time for questions, but I just want to make some closing thoughts because, as we said, this is about an exciter. So for those of you who want to join us and the global mining industry in this fourth industrial revolution, you will realize that we will have to build the plane while it is actually flying. At least we know there is a plane to be built, and we also know that there Right. So if we all work together, carrying our collective interests at heart, we have already won. So let's work together as well. Thank you very much for joining us in this session.
Thank you.
And we're now going back to plenary, as I understand.